believe we are live. Good evening to all my people in the UK or in Europe. If you're in America or anywhere else, hope you're having a good day. So, you see the title, How I Use Instagram to Get Dates. Now, before I start, I don't know how long this will be. I have planned it out. But boys, I can't lie, I've been quite tired to be honest. I've just been traveling literally from the east of England. I was all the way up in Sheerness, which is on the coast. Basically, it's a like a dockyard for shipping containers. So you might be wondering, Ian, why the hell were you in Sheerness near a dockyard? But basically, I went to drop off my dad's car since my dad and my parents have relocated back to Kenya. So they basically wanted to ship their family car to Kenya. So I had to go and drive it all the way to the east of England and then come back on train. So I've been traveling for basically 7 hours today. I've traveled for 7 hours, like 3 hours, well, 4 hours driving to Sheerness and then 3 hours taking the train back. And I just got back like maybe 30 minutes ago. So yeah, forgive me if I sound a little bit drained, but I am pumped for this stream because I think this is a cool topic. And I think it's very relevant to most guys who are trying cold approach, especially in in the modern day. So yeah, I guess in terms of what I'll cover today, I'll just talk about my experience with Instagram, and then I'll also talk about the benefits of Instagram and how I think it can be helpful. But I'll also weave in some important considerations because I'm not one of those guys who's going to say it's a cheat code. I don't think it is a cheat code. I think it can certainly be a tool for the right person. Um, but yeah, I will make some key considerations just so that people are clear on what how it can actually help you. But yeah, before I get started with the actual topic, I do have an announcement. So I am free for the next few weeks, and so therefore I'll be opening up some coaching slots. So if you're living in the UK or anywhere in Europe and you want to, have some one-to-one coaching, then yeah, I'm available, I'm free. So I have a link in the description where you can basically, you know, book a call and we can have a quick 30-minute chat about your situation, um, where you're at currently in terms of if your approach, if you've been approaching or maybe you haven't approached and you've sort of been waiting to pull the trigger, then yeah, I'll be available for a few weeks. I won't be available indefinitely, um, but yeah, I wanted to extend a helping hand to anybody out there who's been watching my content and resonates with the message and wants to transform their dating life. And by the way, if you don't know who I am and you're just like, who the hell is this guy with a big Malteser head talking on camera? Yeah, my name's Ian. 28 years old. I used to have a background. Well, I have a background in economics consultancy. Used to be a data analyst. Yeah, used to be a data analyst as well. Can't even speak. Um, and yeah, now I've got a channel that's about dating, cold approach, and I used to be somebody who had a pretty poor dating life. Barely had any confidence when it came to, shooting my shot and trying to get dates and trying to, basically get options. And then I found cold approach content online, and yeah, it completely transformed my life holistically, not just dating wise, but my general confidence, my general self image, um, and yeah, just my risk taking ability. So yeah, lots and lots of growth over the past year since I started, and I actually got coaching myself, and that really helped me to uh, to get better. Um, so yeah, that was a really, I guess, pivotal moment for me in terms of my progress. But fast forward to today, and everything is rosy. I'm seeing somebody in London who I really like and really attracted to. So yeah, everything is looking much better than it used to look a year and a half ago, which is an understatement to be honest. But yeah, that's enough about me. Um, so the first move, 1999. What's up, bro? So he says, I was waiting for this topic. How's tech sales and everything going? Ah, thank you, brother. Yeah, I'm glad you were waiting for it. Yeah, this is a topic I've always wanted to talk about because it's funny. I like this topic is I think it divides a lot of people in the space. It's certainly a topic that myself and Ephraim, if you know Ephraim Paul University, it's something that we've gone back and forth on a little bit. I think he has a slightly different perspective on this, but I've been developing my own opinion on it over the past few months, just through my own experience and seeing other guys, go with it. So yeah, I think I think you'll find a lot of value in it, my friend. And then you ask me how tech sales is going. Yeah, tech sales is going good. So I'm currently doing the course. So I'm part of this group that's spearheaded by a guy who basically founded a tech sales like education program, and I actually met him out in Thailand when I was traveling. So I'm like halfway through the course now. No, sorry, two-thirds through the course. So I'm finishing up the remaining modules, and then once I've done that, then I'll be looking to do remote sales. So I'll basically enter the job search once I've got the accreditation or the certification from his program. But yeah, that'll be in a couple of weeks. So that's why I've actually opened up the coaching slots, because I have time on my hands, and I thought, you know what, it'll be good to try and help some guys out. It's the start of the year. I know a lot of you guys are trying to make big moves in terms of social skills and dating and I guess other areas of life. So it'll be good to get the year off on a bang. So you asked. So if the first move, 1999, said, could you also talk about the Calendly link and your own coaching and how it works? Yeah. So I mean, I guess if you are interested, just book the call. I mean, I have the available slots there, and there are some details there in terms of what we'll cover on the call in terms of topics. But it'll be a light call, nothing too pushy. It'll just be a case of trying to see if it would be a good fit, because I don't just want to work with um, anybody. I really want to like hone in the kind of clients I work with, because I actually plan on offering a fairly long sort of immersion slot or immersion period. So I did a 3-day immersion when I got coached, but I since I have more time, I want to give a few more days. But of course, there's flexibility in that depending on you know your your schedule. So that's certainly something that we can discuss on the call. But yeah, if you have any more questions, just if you're interested, book the call. There's nothing official. Um, Ultimately, you'll probably still get value. In fact, you will get value from it, because I'll still give pointers in terms of what I think you could do in terms of next steps, even if we don't decide to work together. So yeah, I think it'd be good to have that discussion. Parker Going says hi. What's up, Parker Going? Alexander says hi. He liked and sub. Thank you for the sub, Alex. Akio Obsessed says hi. What's up, Akio? Sobia Khan says hi. What's up, Sobia Khan? Chomster LOR, my guy Chomster. What do you mean using Instagram exactly? So online date. So okay, so Chomster LOL has a very interesting uh comment. So he says, what do you mean using Instagram exactly? So do you mean online dating? I thought you struggled with apps and cold approach was better. You know what? That's a good comment, right? So let me make the distinction now before I get into the topic. So thank you for that comment, Chomster. It's a great name, by the way, Chomster. um, yeah. So what I'm saying is, I still use Instagram when I'm doing my approaches. So I'm not talking about mass DM strategies where I follow 100 chicks in Instagram and then I just, you know, send DMs like a Uzi gun. No, 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 no. I'm not talking about using Instagram as a sole method. I'm saying how I use Instagram or leverage Instagram when I'm doing my approaches. So this is just the way that I integrate it into my approach. So it's certainly not a replacement for the approach itself, right? This is like a tool, right? It's like a handy tool to help you in the process. So I guess it's a really good comment, and it's important to make that distinction. But yeah, I'll get into the details. So Alexander says you're welcome. The first move says my username is inspired by Cold Approach. Like go over and make the first move. I like that. I like that, brother. I like that. Alex says I love your stream. Alex asks me what my stream is about today. Okay, so the stream is about how I use Instagram to get dates, specifically get dates through Cold Approach. So, without further ado, that's a great segue. I will answer the rest of the questions at the end of the stream. But let's go ahead and kick on with it. So now let me start with my own experience, right? So let's rewind a bit, yeah, because obviously I've been doing this for about a year and a half now, and when I first started approaching around September 2024, I didn't get a date until January or February of 2025. So it took me a couple of months to actually get my first date. And at that point, I'd done about 50 approaches, which isn't that much, right? Because, for example, if you decide to get coaching from me, you can probably do 50 approaches within 2 days, right? So it took me, what, September to January? So that's about 4 months to get 50 approaches down, which is an insane amount, right? And so that took a while, right? But the point is, I didn't get dates initially, and then something interesting happened. So I came across a stream from Christian, right? Christian Casanova, and he was like, it was a video about Instagram, and he talked about how, Instagram can be a useful tool, if you feel like you're not really getting any dates through the numbers that I was getting. So at that point, I was getting numbers, right? I was getting numbers. I was having conversations. I was putting myself out there, but I kept getting ghosted. I kept getting flaked. The numbers wouldn't reply to me, right? And when I came across that stream, I thought, okay, I don't have an Instagram. So just full disclosure, when I first started Approach, I didn't have an Instagram. So I was actually off social media for quite a while because I wanted to take a break. This was around the same time when I decided to stop drinking alcohol. So I was on a 3 year like sober abstinence period from drinking. And I also decided to get off social media. So I didn't have any Twitter, no Snapchat, no Facebook, and no Instagram, right? So this was when I was on my self improvement journey. And so when he said that, when I came across that piece of advice from Christian, I thought, okay, it makes sense. And I'll talk about the reasons why, or the reasons he outlined, but I'll give my own, let's say, personal flip or flavor to it. But the point is, I was convinced, and I thought he's making really good points, and this might be something that could, let's say, be a change of fortune, right? Because, like I said, at that point, I wasn't getting any dates. People weren't replying to my messages. So I thought, okay, let's try this. And so it's funny because I remember what I did was around December when I came across that video, I made an Instagram, and I had to build it from scratch. So I followed all my friends from high school, uni, etc. By the way, thank you for the likes on the stream, boys. If you are liking the content, feel free to drop it a like just to increase the algorithmic exposure to other fellow brothers out there who are looking to transform their lives. But yeah, back to the point. So you know I I I thought, okay, let me make an Instagram, right? And follow my friends, get some followers, and then post. So I posted a few, carousels. I don't know if you guys have Instagram, but I posted a few carousels of I guess pictures that were dated like for the previous 3 years, because like I said, I hadn't been on Instagram for a couple of years. So I had a backlog of pictures, right, from stuff that I'd been doing in private. So I decided to just post those like a year by year collage of photos, and that was my, let's say, way to just get something on there, right? Because obviously, if I had an empty profile, that wouldn't be helpful. So I did that in December, and then in January and February, I got back out there again, right? I had that New Year enthusiasm, as some of you might have right now. So this is back last year, January 2025, And I went out there, and I went out for one session in London. I remember this, right? I went out to a session in London, um, and I had my Instagram, and I probably did about maybe 12 approaches, and I had two solid conversations, right? And the first was with this, beautiful Iranian girl, British Iranian girl, and the second one was with this like Slovakian girl who was in uni. And you know, I won't talk about the conversations, but essentially I gave them my Instagram. So I went out with the intention of not asking for numbers. I said, let me just use Instagram. And so I gave both of my Instagram. And then what do you know? That week, they both responded. We were talking a little bit on DMs. And then I went on a date with both of them the next week. And so that was the first time I got dates from Cold Approach. And it was through Instagram, right? And I thought to myself, this was the secret. This was the secret sauce, right? This was the like the magical like spell that I needed to shift everything into gear. And obviously I was super happy. And now, of course, that was the beginning. And this is not to say that every single time I've given somebody my Instagram that I've gotten dates, but that was a pivotal moment because obviously that gave me the confidence to continue approaching since I finally got dates and went on those dates. Um, but yeah, now having now obviously that was in January 2025, so it's been a year since then, and I've obviously had a lot of different experiences, Instagram, no Instagram, etc., etc. So now we'll get into the meat and bones of why I think it benefited me, what I think the benefits are in general, and then I'll also talk about the considerations that have to be accounted for, because the benefits are just the benefits, but there are, let's say, prerequisites, right? So let's get into it. So I think the first benefit is what people refer to as social proof, right? And so social proof, to describe it in, I guess, the simplest way, is just showing people that you have somewhat of a social life, or you are, let's say, socially capable and accepted, right? So, social proof is sort of like a metric, and people can gauge it based on whether, you know, you're, let's say, a normal person, right? So a good example of this would be, you know, if there's a picture of me with friends, or a picture of me at work giving a presentation, or a picture of me with my family, then people will look at that and think, oh, okay, so this person is social. People can stand being around this person, right? Um, so this person isn't antisocial. This person isn't a menace, right? Just based on the pictures, right? Because humans, we're social beings. So if we see somebody around other people, even though this is happening subconsciously, we a part of us feels a bit more safe around that person because this person is around other people. So there's a really good analogy, right, where they've done tests where they'll have two restaurants on a street, and they'll have one restaurant that cooks really terrible food, and then they'll have another restaurant that cooks amazing food. But there's a caveat. So the restaurant that cooks terrible food, they intentionally get actors to line up outside the restaurant around the block. And then for the restaurant that is good, they actually put like one or two people in the line. So they basically, they purposefully divide the two restaurants between having a long line, which obviously signals that that restaurant is popular, and then they also do the opposite for the other restaurant, right, to show that it doesn't get that much interest. And what do you know? They wanted to test how many people would join the line of the shitty restaurant, even though it's shitty. And of course, you find out that a lot of people would just go to the restaurant that had the longer line, even though it didn't look as good as the better restaurant. So what is that, right? Well, that's because obviously people see the line and they think, oh, if there's lots of people there, then I can make, let's say, a subconscious judgment that there must be something there worth its weight. There must be something valuable in that restaurant. And so, you know, So even though the other restaurant is quote unquote better based on maybe how it looks or the way that it's been advertised, ultimately people vote with their feet. And so if people see other people voting with their feet, then they tend to just follow the crowd. And that's kind of similar to social proof, right? Like if I see somebody's profile and it's just pictures of themselves, selfie photos, or them in the gym, and there's nobody else around them, then that's going to be a little bit, let's say, it could be perceived as off. It could be, right? I'm not saying that's the case all the time, but it could be perceived off. And if you compare that to somebody who's got pictures of them giving speeches, or pictures of them with their friends, arm in arm on a camping trip or a hiking trip, or you've got a picture of you and your family at a wedding, then this portrays completely different picture, right? And the reason social proof is important in like the modern day, like in 2026 essentially, is because you know think about it from the context of cold approach, right? So remember, we are approaching women in public and they don't know who we are, right? And so I think there is a certain segment of the population of women who, even if you approach them really well, even if the technique is really good, there might be something in the back of their mind that is unsure, right? Because ultimately you are a stranger, right? And she doesn't know who you are, even if you were smooth, even if you were really confident. Because the truth is, anybody could be confident, right? Now, granted, actually I take that back. Not that many people are confident, especially in this context. So I actually think that bold, courageous, risk-taking behavior during the approach, it signals more positivity than negativity. In fact, it doesn't signal any negativity. So let's get that straight. But that being said, ultimately, you are a stranger, and she doesn't have a great idea of who you are because you've just come out of nowhere. And some people are, let's say, a little bit risk averse, right? And so whilst many girls will just be like, oh, he was really cool, he came across really calm and collected and composed, therefore I'm gonna give it a chance and go out on a date. Others might be like, oh, I'm not quite sure, like I don't know who this is. And you never know, like, I don't know, sometimes maybe they are down to go on a date with you, and then they tell their family, and their family's like, are you crazy? Like, why would you go on a date with this guy? It's like, you never know. You never know, right? We'll never truly know. But the point is, we live in an era of mistrust, right? And if we want to bridge that gap between trust and mistrust, then Instagram and social proof specifically can go a long way, right? So that's the first benefit, right? Especially because if you ask for the number, she has no further context as to who you are. And so this ties into my second point, which is the fact that Instagram serves as a lifestyle billboard, right? So I say billboard because it's essentially an advertisement, right? So think of it like a landing page or billboard or any type of advertising medium, right? So it's a way for us to showcase our lifestyle, right? Meaning we can put pictures up there where, it's us with our friends or us on holiday. Me personally, I play the drums. So on my profile, I've got a few videos of me playing the drums, right? And jamming out. So it could be that. It could be a picture of a recent hiking trip you took, right? So again, I'll use myself as the example. On my Instagram, I have a video reel of my time in Thailand. So I got lots of cool clips and B-roll footage, some of which is actually on my YouTube channel if you go on my Thailand vlogs. But basically, I have like a whole reel, one reel of my time in Thailand, right? So of course that's a really cool video, right? Because people can see that and go, oh, like this guy travels, he's done solo traveling, he's been out there, he made friends. Because there's lots of videos of me with a lot of the cool people that I met out there in Thailand. So yeah, those kind of pictures or videos, like they showcase what I get up to. Because when you're doing the approach, you don't always have time, right, to discuss everything about you, right? Because obviously I advocate that you talk about yourself to a degree, right? Because we wanna connect with the chick, so you don't want to never to say anything about yourself. But typically, most of these approaches don't last that long unless you get an instant date and you end up getting out there and pursuing. sorry, you get out there and you get time to really get to know each other a bit more. But assuming it's a typical approach, you won't have much time, right? Time is limited. It could be a quick interaction. So Instagram can kind of do the heavy lifting on the back end once you've done a good approach and you've essentially like convinced her enough in terms of your confidence, but maybe she's a little bit intrigued and so she wants to look at your Instagram and she sees, oh, okay, yeah, he's got all this cool stuff. Like I didn't get a chance to speak to him much, but he seems really interesting. So that could be like the that could be like the extra nudge that she needed to give her well, to make her want to go on a date with you. So yeah, that can be really helpful as well. Um, so yeah, especially in those approaches where they're in a rush, right? You haven't had a chance to speak at all, but you can tell that she gave some level of interest. Then yeah, I think that's when Instagram can really help because it basically speaks on your behalf without you having to say anything. And I think even sometimes if the approach isn't great, but you give the Instagram and then she sees that, oh, you're actually a fairly, you've got stuff about you, then yeah, that can be really helpful. So yeah, to be fair, the third benefit was tied to what I said earlier. So it can be a useful tool, sorry, when the conversation is really short. And then benefit four is something that I've noticed, which is I think a lot of the younger women I've approached, and by the way, I'm 28, so when I say younger, I mean like what, early 20s, basically. Um, they seem to prefer Instagram a bit more than like the older women I've been on dates with. Um, and so that could just be like a generational thing, right? They spend more time on IG. So for example, the girl I'm seeing now, um, I asked her for her. I think I asked her for her Instagram because the interaction was short. Which just as a side point, goes to show that you don't necessarily have to have a long conversation to get a girl who's interested, right? Like we've been seeing each other for basically 3 months at this point, right? Um, and so yeah, our interaction was very short, probably 3 minutes max. But I got her Instagram, right, and then we continued talking on there, and then went on a date eventually. Um, and yeah, so yeah, and she's younger than me as well. So I think that can be a, let's say, a generational difference. Um, and so yeah, it's sort of like it's a more popular form of communication amongst like Gen Z. Um, and again, I don't want to sound like a boomer or like a millennial. I mean, I'm actually the first year of Gen Z, so I'm 28. So I'm the first year, 1997, I believe, is the cutoff point. So for all my Gen Z guys out there, I'm with you. But yeah, so that's the fourth one. Um, and so yeah, I think the first consideration, right? So obviously I've just listed all these benefits, but those benefits come with an asterisk. And the first asterisk, or the first consideration, is a very, very important point. And this is arguably the most important point of the live stream, right? Which is Instagram is an amplifier, not a generator. Okay? It's an amplifier, not a generator. So, what do I mean by that? So, Instagram will amplify your qualities, it will amplify your confidence, whatever confidence that is, right? So if you go in with a strong approach, you're loud, you're convicted, you really mean it, it's not half-assed, and you have a decent conversation, even if it's short, you still maneuver your way around the conversation well. You don't startle her, she feels safe. If that's all the case, and also bearing in mind, you also feel like you're worthy, you have a you have good inner confidence, and you believe in what you're doing, then it will amplify that, right? Whereas if you're the opposite, right, then I don't think Instagram will help you that much, right? So when I say it's not a generator, what I basically mean is I don't think Instagram can just generate or manufacture aura from the ground up, right? So if you think about like aura, it's sort of this this like energetic confidence that is sort of it sort of speaks before you've even said anything, right? Like the aura sort of just it sort of it's projected, right? Of course, it's also projected in how we talk, whether it's pace of speech, tonality, etc. What we what we say and how we say it. But a lot of that energy is transmuted or communicated. It's sort of like an intangible sub communication below the surface. And a lot of that is based on how you feel about yourself in the moment, in the approach, on the day, your mood, your frequency, etc. And that's what I'm saying. Instagram, it won't make up for a lack of confidence. It won't make up for a lack of self belief. It won't make up for poor technique, right? Like his poor technique. If it's like shaky technique because it was the first approach of the day, then fine, it could help. Like I said, sometimes you can get away with, a fairly like mediocre approach if you get an Instagram, if you use Instagram. But for the most part, it won't make up for that, right? And that's really important because I don't want guys watching, anybody watching, to think that I am prescribing Instagram as some sort of alternative that means you can slack on the approach or not have to put your reps in to get better, because this is lazy thinking, this is shortcut thinking, and I don't advocate for that. None of this is supposed to be a shortcut. Like I said at the start, it's meant to be a tool. And so remember, it's an amplifier of your character and your confidence. It's not a generator. It will not just, like, you can't be like, oh, you know, I'm in a bad mood and my approach is terrible. I don't feel good about myself. I hate myself. And then try and like, and then take that energy into the approach, then give her Instagram and expect her to want to spend time with you, right? Sure, could it work if you're one of those guys who has millions of followers, right? And is like this clouted influencer, then, and the approach is poor, maybe. But then I doubt that would be the case, because the chances are, if you're somebody who's reached that caliber, then you probably have the confidence at the front end, like you have the inner confidence to approach well. And by the way, of course, I'm not saying that you need to have thousands of followers or millions of followers to leverage Instagram, but that's the first consideration. Then the second consideration. So assuming that you are fairly confident in yourself, you have a fairly decent technique or a good technique, then the next thing to consider is just the profile, right? So you need to have a good profile, right? And so what is a good profile? Well, you need a nice set of photos, right? So a diverse set of photos. So not just a profile with three photos of, you at the gym, and then a picture of your carpet, and then a picture of your cat. Like, that's not a great profile. That's just bare bones, no effort. Like, it's not enticing. I wouldn't look at that profile and go, oh yeah, like this is somebody that I really want to go on a date with. Like, obviously not, right? So, a nice set of photos is just, like I said, photos of you and your friends, photos of you doing hobbies. Um, maybe even if you like photography, a few photos of a couple of interesting sceneries, or sorry, like a nice set of photos of like interesting landscapes. If you went to some cool, you know, national park in the UK, or you went on like a cool hiking trip somewhere, put that up there. You know, obviously traveling is great because girls love to travel. They love to talk about travel on dates as well. So if you have a couple of pictures of you on holiday with your family or your friends, then yeah, feel free to put those up there. And also put pictures of you in those places, right? So not just pictures of the place itself, but just pictures of you, posing somewhere. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. I'm not saying hire a photographer to take, amazing 4K quality photos, or candid photos of you, but just anything that has you in it in the nice area is always a bonus, right? And this goes to show that so I should say that I used to be somebody who didn't like taking photos, especially in public, but over the years I've just grown to accept it and actually embrace it, because I think it's really cool to have memories, right? I'm not saying be the guy who has his phone out 24/7 um, and is always recording everything, but having a nice collection of photos is important, right? Especially if you are gonna play the social media game, and want to leverage it, which I think is an important strategy in the modern day. then you need to put a bit of effort, right? Take photos, get friends to take photos of you, get group photos, ask strangers to take photos. So I remember when I went to Amsterdam, it was a solo trip. So, if I didn't have any friends with me for the most part, although I met people out and about, but, I took a few photos where I was by myself and then I just asked a stranger who looked approachable and I said, hey, excuse me, can you take a photo of me? And they went, oh, yeah, yeah, of course. And, most people are willing to do that for you. So, again, we are courageous action takers. So if you can approach a girl, like you can ask a stranger to take a photo for you. And if you really don't want to do that, then if you can't do that, then I would question if cold approach is even for you, to be honest. But yeah, without going on a tangent. So like I said, have a nice set of photos, not too many. Like I think 6 photos is enough, to be honest. So there's 2 rows of 3 is enough. Um, and then in terms of followers, I'd say I pulled this number um not randomly, but I gave it thought and I was like, okay, obviously I'm not going to suggest that people need thousands of followers. I personally have like I think 240 followers. But I think honestly anything above 50 should be okay. Like if you only have 5 followers, then yeah, somebody might look at that and go, this person only like knows 5 people. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I want to say also this, right? Like I know there's guys out there who aren't big social media guys, and I get that, right? Like you don't want to be caught up in the dopamine, um, hijacking of Instagram and Reels and TikTok and all that sort of thing. So I get that. And so I imagine maybe even a lot of your friends aren't on Instagram. So, even getting 50 followers might seem like a stretch to some people. And I get that. So if that's you, then maybe Instagram just isn't for you. But I would like to think that most people know like 50 people, right? Um, Again, I have 240 followers, but that's not to say that I have 240 friends, right? Like, it's just people I follow who I used to go to school with, university, former work friends. Um, and you'd be surprised that that can obviously add up, right? But out of that 240, I probably only really speak to like 15 or 20 of them, or at least speak to those people on a regular basis. Um, so yeah, obviously, like ideally, I mean, I don't like spending time or too much time on social media, even though I have a YouTube channel. But in terms of like Instagram itself, I don't like spending too much time on that. So I totally get it. But again, guys, we're trying to optimize, right? So we want to have as many, let's say, channels of attack or not attack, just as many channels as possible in terms of getting leads and getting dates. Because ultimately, we want dates, and we are smart, intelligent men, so we adjust to the times, right? But we can still do it on our terms. I'm not saying you have to be a doom scroller now or spend hours curating the best profile. So that's uh that's the second consideration. Oh yeah, so 2 more points actually, or 1 more point actually on this, which is I've obviously spoken about photos with friends, family, and what kind of photos to put on your profile. But obviously there is so some people make the point that it's important to have pre-selection photos. So pre-selection photos just basically means like having pictures of you with other girls. And I think this is something that sort of came from the PUA days, right? Because it was essentially a way for you to show your attraction as a guy who gets girls, and so that would sort of like again subconsciously tell women that, oh, other girls like him, therefore he must be cool, he must be interesting, he must be attractive, and that can increase their attraction of you through the, let's say, female social proof that you've garnered by having a bunch of girls around your arm. Now, I don't think that's necessary, to be honest, and I certainly don't do that. I actually think on my profile there's only 2 pictures of me with another girl, and obviously that one of those one of those pictures is me and my cousin, so that doesn't count, obviously. And then the second one is a recent one as part of a carousel, and that's just somebody who I went to a wedding with, and we're good friends. So it's not like I've got like a picture of me with 5 chicks, 2 on one side, 3 on the other. We're on the yacht. Nah. um, I don't have any of those photos. And I do have photos with me and the girls updated, but I just don't put them on. I don't put them up on my Instagram because I don't think it's necessary. I think I'd rather just show the person that I'm a normal person who has friends. Like I'm not trying to portray this like player image, right? She can just get that energy. She can get the sense that I'm somebody who's been here and done that and been on dates just based off my demeanor, right? We're trying to communicate that in person. I don't need to use Instagram to do that. So that's just my own personal opinion. But yeah, of course that is an avenue, but me personally, nah, I don't think it's necessary. So, um, that's it in terms of benefits and considerations. And then to finish up, so I think there is one drawback about Instagram, and this is something that I know Ephraim kind of agrees with me on this, and he's the one who actually sort of steered me in this direction or opened my eyes up to this reality, which is if you ask for an Instagram, it can actually shoot you in the foot, especially with the interactions where you've actually built rapport, you've had a good conversation, maybe like a at least a 6 minute conversation, maybe even 10 minutes, and you've had a nice back and forth. She's clearly interested, giving you signals, and then you ask for the Instagram, right? And sometimes that can almost shock the girl, or she's a little bit confused because they expect at that point they expect you to ask for the number, because giving a number for most people is a lot more intimate, right? It's a lot more personal, like a phone number, right? That's like a phone number. Whereas an Instagram profile, a lot of people have their profiles public, and like I said before, um, I have 240 followers, which, but I wouldn't consider all those people to be like close friends. So, of those 240 followers, maybe 20% of them have my phone number. Maybe that's like an optimistic estimate, right? So I don't just give my phone number to anybody, right? But you can imagine when you've had a nice cold approach conversation, and at that point it's gone well. So the next logical step is to ask for the phone number, right? But if you ask for the Instagram, then that can sometimes I don't know, like it can kind of I think it can shoot you in the foot. And I'll give you a reason why. And I thought about this and I realized that one of the dangers of like having Instagram and using it is that you can almost become over reliant. So I think because of the way that it helped me at the start, I think there was a period where I actually relied on it too much and I asked for it too much. And I asked for it in situations where I probably would have been better off just going for the number and then falling back on the Instagram if she decided to go down that route, which I'll talk about a bit later as well, right? But I think when the conversation is going well, it just makes sense to smoothly transition into asking for her phone number because it is a more intimate contact detail, but you've won the right to ask for it because the conversation went well, because the cold approach itself or the approach itself went well. So again, I talk about congruency from beginning to end, right? And you could argue that it is more bold to ask for a phone number, right? So yeah, I think it can shoot you in the foot. So don't become too reliant, right? And so as I'll probably make the point at the end of the stream, it's like ultimately we are every approach is unique, every experience is different, and so once you've had a lot of experience dealing with different situations in terms of closing, then you'll start to get a better sense of, okay, does it make sense to ask for this, or do I ask for this? Although I will give you my general rule of thumb in a few minutes. um, and so a good example of how asking for the phone number makes sense is actually an experience that I had recently. So when I was in Thailand and I approached this Finnish girl, um, who I ended up going on a date with and then eventually brought her back to my place. The conversation went well. The approach went well. We spoke for 10 minutes. We had a nice back and forth. There was a bit of banter, certainly flirty energy, and I could feel it from her. And so I remember in that moment when it came to closing, I almost asked for the Instagram. I almost asked for the Instagram. And I I actually didn't, right? So I decided, I'm gonna ask for the WhatsApp. And I'm so happy I did because obviously she responded, but it turned out that when I eventually got her Instagram later on in the night after we'd had our fun, I realized she told me that she barely uses it, right? So she barely used her Instagram, and she had a lot of followers on there as well. So you can imagine if I'd asked for her Instagram, she might not have responded, right? She might not have responded, or she might not have seen the message because it would have got caught up in a bunch of other DMs from other guys. So on reflection, I was like, oh, thank God that I asked for um, the the number, right? The WhatsApp. So that was a sort of like pivotal um, like experience that really solidified the fact that you should go for the number if you've had a good conversation. Um, so yeah, I'll just talk about my approach. So now I'm wrapping up the stream. So my own approach. So my rule of thumb is this: I typically ask for the Instagram if the interaction is very short, right? So that's really the only time when I ask for the Instagram. If the interaction is short, and if I feel like I didn't get a good gauge on whether or not she was interested, right? Otherwise, I'm always asking for the number, right? Now, if I ask for the number and then she offers pushback and says, "Can I give you my Instagram?" then I'll think about it in two ways, right? So, if I can tell that she's sort of giving me the Instagram as a way to like shoo me off, right? Then I might offer a little bit of pushback and be like, "Oh, your Instagram, like, do you want me to become another number added to your list of followers and guys?" Maybe I'll do it in like in a light, playful way, right? Just to gauge the reason why she's giving it, right? Because obviously, once I drop that comment and I call it out, she could either say, "Oh no, like I just prefer to use Instagram just because I'm not quite sure about giving my number out this early on," and then I'll go, "Okay, yeah, that's cool." Right? Or she might be like, "Yeah, I'm not really like interested," and so she might actually just, you know, basically admit that actually I was just gonna give you my Instagram to reject you, but I wasn't comfortable just like saying it, right? And so you might get your answer there and then, which is good because we don't want to be led on, right? We want to have a proper idea of whether or not this person is likely to respond, right? This is what we talk about filtering. This is the filtering process of understanding, is she really interested? Is she giving me her Instagram because that's just her preferred mode of communication, or is she giving me her Instagram to kind of shoo me off, right? So my rule of thumb is, um, if she says, "Can I give you her Instagram?" just offer some pushback, light-hearted, not serious, obviously. Or if she gives you a good answer, just go with the flow, take it, and see what happens, right? And so I think I guess that's the best way to go about it, in my opinion. And so, like I said, or briefly touched on earlier, the final point that I want to make is that ultimately every situation is unique, and you it's up to you to figure out what the moment calls for, right? And another big point underneath this is, guys, Instagram won't help you if you don't have the confidence, right? So for example, when I think I mentioned that the girl I'm seeing now is somebody who took my Instagram and she asked me for my Instagram. And when we spoke about the approach on one of our dates, she told me, I asked her, I was like, "Oh yeah, so like, you know I forgot how it came up in conversation, but we basically started talking about my approach." And she just said to me, "Look, you were really calm when you approached me, right? You just had this calm energy, and I really liked it. And so even though we didn't speak for long, I was like, I really like that guy. I wanna see what happens." And it's funny because she actually was approached by somebody else that same day in London. And then I asked her, "Oh, so how did that approach go?" And she was like, "Oh, it was really awkward. Like he was really super nervous." And so you can imagine if that guy had an Instagram. Imagine if he even had a decent Instagram, right? One that's better than mine, whatever better means, right? That wouldn't have made up for his, let's say, poor approach, right? Maybe he was. I mean, I don't know who that guy is. I'm not gonna shit on him, but the point is, my Instagram just helped me in, let's say, furthering the interaction after the approach. So again, it was an amplifier, not a generator. Um, and so yeah, it's really important to consider that, boys. So that is what I wanted to say about Instagram. Hopefully you guys found that valuable. So let's go through the comments. I'm gonna have to scroll up a bit. So okay, so the first move 1999 said, have you ever had issues with tonality? Girls have asked me if I was gay before. It's discouraging. I have a high pitched voice. It's a little annoying. Interesting. Okay. So have I ever had issues with tonality? I certainly have. I certainly have. And it's funny because I didn't notice my issues with tonality until I got coaching, because when I was recorded and I had the audio recordings, I could finally hear myself back. So I made the mistake of not recording myself when I was doing this solo. And that was kind of, that was because I'd already found some success. So my egotistical, silly brain thought, oh, I must be pretty good at this already. I don't need to record myself. But the truth is, I probably lost so many opportunities because I wasn't actually auditing my my conversations and my voice. So I certainly had some issues. Sometimes I wouldn't say that I have a high pitched voice, but if you guys can hear how I sound now. But if when I listened back to my first recorded audios, you could hear I had this more like frantic, high pitched voice, or higher pitched voice, and I would end sentences like, "Oh, okay," like, "Oh, cool," like, "Oh, okay," instead of like just keeping it pretty chill. Um, and so I don't think it was a big issue, but it was certainly an issue for sure. And it's something that I fixed, right? Upon reflecting on it and seeing it or hearing it for the first time. But I think my tonality issue was just the case of, um, well, needing more confidence, doing more approaches, getting more experience, um, and then also just being more comfortable with owning the approach from top to bottom, and also being less agreeable. I think tonality sometimes is tied in with agreeability. A lot of the time when we're in the conversations, we just say yes, we agree with everything she's saying. We don't really offer pushback. Also, I think when you're talking fast, I think talking fast also coincides with having like a higher pitched tone. So if you're like a frantic speaker because you're nervous or because you just haven't been in as many conversations, then yeah, that can be an issue. And so I feel you. I mean, I know it can be discouraging, um, but again, I don't know how you sound. Like you said, you have a high pitched voice. Um, if that's how your voice is, then I don't think it would necessarily be a big issue. Again, I'll need to hear it myself to really know if it's like a problem. Um, because obviously we all come in different shapes and sizes, and we all sound different. We all have different voices. And so I wouldn't want to say that having a high pitched voice necessarily counts you out. It's more so just figuring out, okay, is that like a permanent thing, or is it like, where are you actually on the scale, and is it something that can be worked on? Um, so yeah. So the first move, 1999, also said, could you talk about the type of photos to have and such too? I struggle with Instagram, to be honest. Okay, well, I mean, I basically covered that on the live stream, so hopefully my points answered your question. So Chompster LOL says, here are my thoughts, Ian. The issue I see though is, do we want to attract girls who are only interested because we have good pics or social status or social proof? It's like authenticity versus pickup. Okay, it's a good question. And I actually wrote a note to myself about this sort of dilemma because I agree. Ultimately, we want to be with girls who are properly interested in us, right? We don't want to feel like we have to convince girls to like us. And so we don't want to think about Instagram from the frame of, okay, she didn't like me much during the approach, but then she might like me after seeing my Instagram, right? Because you're right, is that the kind of girl that we want, right? And so I think it's a fine line. It's a fine line because ultimately we want to be authentic, right? And so the main point is, Are we giving our, or are we showing our authentic selves during the approach and also on Instagram, right? So it's not like my Instagram, for example. So I'll use my own personal example, right? So my Instagram, I'm not like positioning it to portray like a fake image, right? Like I said, it's just basically an extension of myself, right? It's just basically like a catalog of experiences that I've had, just to give just to give the girl a taste into sort of what I'm about and like what I get up to, right? Now, I don't think I think when I talk about Instagram as something that could be a deal breaker, right? Because ultimately, what are we really trying to figure out here, right? Because like having an Instagram, if she was gonna say yes either way, then it doesn't really matter if the Instagram nudged her from 60% to 70% yes, right? Because ultimately she was interested, she liked the approach, she enjoyed your conversation, so she was gonna say yes anyway. But we're really trying to figure out, okay, can Instagram be a deal breaker? Like, can it turn a no into a yes? And when we're asking the question, can it turn a no into a yes? I'm not saying that we want to turn no's that were complete no's into yeses purely based on Instagram, because I don't actually think that would work, right? I think Instagram just provides a nudge. So I mentioned the first point I mentioned was the social proof aspect. And I think that's really the most important thing, because even if she likes you, even if she was comfortable in the conversation, I think there might be instances. I don't know what percentage, right? Again, this is like hard to predict, right? But I know that there will be instances where the girl's on the fence, not because she didn't like you, but it's just because she didn't have enough time to figure out if you were like safe. And maybe that's the wrong word, right? Because ultimately, if you do the approach well, she'll feel safe. But like the reality is that, like I said before, we live in a sort of era where there's a lot of mistrust, right? Obviously, women are the weaker gender in terms of just physicality, right? And so we have to acknowledge that even though we are courageous action takers who don't give a fuck, and we do what we want and we express our desires and we put ourselves on the line and we approach in the streets, broad daylight, in front of people, at the bus stop, coffee shop, who cares? Even though that's us, we have to understand that we're piercing into other people's worlds, right? And most people don't do this, right? This is a very niche skill. And so we have to acknowledge that there might be instances where the girl's just a little bit hesitant, a little bit, not fully, a little bit, right? And maybe the Instagram is like the thing, right? It's the thing that nudges her. Because I'll mention this as well. There's a guy that I watched on YouTube, and he made a point about Instagram. This was again way back, and he spoke about his own experience, and he said that his girlfriend is somebody who he approached right in public, daylight, and even though he got her number, but then when they were talking on text, she asked for his Instagram, right? Which is interesting, right? So she already responded on text, right? So you'd think, oh, this is a done deal already, right? She's not ghosted me, she's not flaked, she's responding. But then it turned out that she asked him for his Instagram, and he gave it to her. He didn't say no. And then he talked about how maybe a few weeks later he was curious and asked, yeah, like, why did you ask me for my Instagram? And she just flat out said, I just wanted to see what you were about. I wanted to see if you were like a normal guy. That's what she said. Like, I wanted to see if you were a normal guy. Not if you were like a flashy guy or if you had lots of money or this and that. She just wanted to see if he was a normal guy. And like, I think we can take a lot from that, right? Because again, they only have a certain like picture of you when you've approached, right? And even if you obviously, well, most of us guys who are in this space, we're stand-up guys, we're good guys, we have no ill intent, we have no malicious intent, we just want to get dates. Like, it's not like we're trying to do anything crazy here, Jesus. um but like the reality is that there can be a little bit of resistance, and I think Instagram can just give that nudge. So I don't think it's like pickup, because pickup is different, right? Like pickup used to focus on pre-selection, having photos with 10 different girls in your arm. Pickup would tell you to buy thousands of followers to increase social proof. It's like I'm not advocating for any of that. Um, so yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Trumpster. So the first move, 1999, says, does code approach mainly come down to technique, self-belief, and conversation skills, or is it a lot of things in one? When will you make the video breaking down your own experience getting coaching? Yeah, so I'll answer your last question first. So I will make a video on that. I'll do a live stream on that actually, in terms of my experience getting coaching. Um, And then to answer your first question, so does it come down to technique, self belief, and conversation skills? I mean, yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I mean, the technique part, obviously, that's what gets you in the door, right? That's the first part of the approach. And so we need to get that on point to a good degree. It doesn't have to be perfect all the time. I can definitely tell you that I've been on dates with girls who I approached and the technique wasn't amazing, but they were still happy. We still had a good conversation and we ended up going on a date. So the technique doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be good enough. And then yeah, self-belief and conversation skills. I mean, I think these kind of go hand in hand. You know, ultimately, once you have the technique sorted, then yes, we want to go in with confidence, and that confidence is based on how much we believe in ourselves. Do we think we're worthy? You know, do we believe that we can actually give this girl a good time? You know, how do we feel about ourselves out in public? Are we self-conscious, right? Um, or do we believe that we're doing something wrong? Like, a big part of self-belief is, do I actually believe in code approach? Like, do I believe in this as a skill? Or do I still have a lot of shame attached to it? Am I still afraid of what other people might think, even if I believe that it's a legitimate way to approach, right? So yeah, that's a big part of it. And yeah, conversation skills, yeah, obviously those are important. Um, because we're having conversations with strangers. We're going from complete strangers to potential lovers in the space of 5 6 minutes. So yeah, that's a big part of it as well. So I would say yeah that I think it certainly comes down to those three aspects. I think in terms of other aspects that you didn't mention, I mean, the intangibles, right? So obviously you mentioned self belief, and I think that's like an inner game, um, like aspect of code approach, right? So how do we feel internally, in terms of yeah self belief, self worth, confidence, shame, conviction, um, even just our general mood. Like, are you in a generally good mood? Are you in a positive mood? Have you had a decent day? Or are you moody? Are you negative? Are you pessimistic? Are you cynical? Your worldview. How do you perceive the world around you? How do you perceive other people in public? All of these tenets are also important, and they're all internal. I think a part that maybe you didn't really talk about was looks, right? So code approach is somewhat, their looks are somewhat important in terms of looking presentable, right? But I always stress that's all I'm saying. You just have to look presentable. You don't have to look like a model. You don't have to look incredible. I mean, do I look like a model? Furthest from it. But I'm just happy with how I look. I'm content, and I get a haircut every now and then. Although again, I still need to get a haircut. Jeez. Okay, now it's getting a bit ridiculous. um, but yeah, no, there are other factors important because first impressions matter. So we do want to look presentable if we can. But sometimes you've just come from the gym and you're sweaty, and then you see the girl and you're like, I gotta approach her. It's now or never. And so that can work too. So I'm not saying you have to be always suited and booted. So the first move, 1999, he has a good question, an interesting one. So he says, do you think the number of likes matters? I get between 30 and 50. And what are your thoughts on the followers to following ratio? Okay, so yeah, so I'm glad you made this point because I'm sure a lot of other guys thought about this. Maybe they just didn't want to they didn't want to drop it in the comments. So I'm glad you mentioned it, but I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters. I don't think girls are going on your profile and going, "Oh, wait, he only has 20 likes. He's a low value man. He hasn't got clout." I don't think that's what's happening. I don't think anybody's going for your likes. I mean, if you had one like, then maybe it should be like, are all his followers bots, right? So maybe you wouldn't get away with that. But mate, 30 to 50 likes, you're good. You're fine. Like you're cool. I don't think it really matters, to be honest. And I don't even show my likes, I don't show them on my photos. And so unless somebody actively clicks on it, then yeah, she's not really gonna know. So I don't think it matters. And then you said, what are my thoughts on the followers to following ratio? Again, I don't think it matters that much. Again, of course, if we're talking about extreme examples, if you have 10 followers but you follow 500 people, I guess that's a little bit off. But I don't know, like I think on this one, I actually think if you get details from a girl who wants to go out with you, but then she sees your following to follower ratio, and she says, "Oh, his follower to following ratio is, 1 to 5 or whatever," then I think that's very childish, and you're probably better off just not being with that person because, like, it's not that, like, why is that important? You know, like, maybe you just follow a lot of interesting people, right? Interesting people that you're inspired by, musicians, artists, creators, academics, podcasters. I follow a couple of podcasters. Um, and so, yeah, I don't think that's a deal breaker. Um, and of course, at the extreme ends, it can look a bit odd, but I think most people have a decent ratio. I'm certainly not one of those people who's like, you have to have more followers than people you follow. Because I know some people are like that. I know how people are. To be fair, I probably used to be like that way back in the day. I'm talking like 10 years ago when I had Instagram for the first time. You know, you would do that follow for follow thing, and you know, the idea that you'd have more followings, or you'd follow more people than you follow, or sorry, you'd follow more people than people follow you. Like that would be like a, oh my god, this guy's, he's been ratioed. It's like, nah. But adults, who cares? I don't think it's a big deal. So the first move, 1999, says, is style and fashion super important as well? Yeah. So like I said before, I think style is important. I don't think it's super important, but find a style that works for you, because your style, again, it is an amplifier. So it's important to be somebody who puts some time in their appearance, right? Like, you want to be somewhat presentable. You want to show that you take care of yourself. And so, if you're looking good, if you have a nice fit on, it's going to help you feel more confident. Anything that makes you feel a bit more confident certainly can go a long way. Um, because, yeah, your look says a lot about you, and that can be, like I said, first impressions matter. But of course, fashion isn't going to be a generator. It won't manufacture aura from level zero. It's like I said, it's another amplifier, right? It's what inside that really counts. So Blitz Video Gaming says, hi, what's up? The first move says, have you ever been to Birmingham? My cousin moved there when he was young. I've been to Birmingham once. I went to Birmingham when I was in university. So one of my friends, he was having his birthday in Leeds, and so we decided to go to Birmingham the day after. So yeah, I went out there. I went to that club. What was it called? Was it called Prism? I think it was called Prism. I don't even know if it's still open, but yeah, I've been there once, but it was only for a night out, so I didn't spend too much time. But yeah, I know about Birmingham and Brom. I know the Brom accent. Shout out to all my brothers in Brom. Am I AI? I'll let you decide, my friend. Adnan, Adan. So shout out to Adan. Hope you're doing well, bro. Adan asks me, have you read up philosophy a lot of times, Ian? I want to get into a lot of philosophy to actually educate myself. Ah, okay. I have read up on philosophy. I'm a big fan of philosophy. The first philosophy or type of philosophy that I got into was Stoicism. So if you want to get into that, I'd recommend looking into Marcus Aurelius and Seneca. That will certainly help you in terms of basically being, you know, trying to find peace and calm in stressful situations. It just gives you a much more well-rounded perspective on suffering and how the I guess the human experience of pain and um, different emotions and impulsive behavior, and a lot of Stoic philosophy is centered around the cardinal virtues, which I believe are like courage, temperance, justice, and wisdom. So like those are the main like virtues of Stoicism. So obviously courage, very applicable to code approach, right? Uh, Temperance. So temperance is just basically like self control. So again, I would say you know uh, self control is very important in code approach. Certainly when it comes to managing your emotions and controlling your let's say your physiological response to fear. Um, and then justice, maybe justice isn't so much related to code approach. But wisdom certainly is, right? Wisdom is all about knowledge, learning, having the student's mind, obviously iterating, working on mistakes, improving, and of course that all applies to code approach. So um, yeah, I would definitely say go have a look at that for sure. Um, and then other philosophies, I mean, there's so much out there, man. Like there's Greek philosophy, there's Roman philosophy. There's more modern day philosophers like the Renaissance ones. You've got people like Nietzsche, and those kind of guys. There's a lot of French philosophers. Um, so yeah, I'm still getting into it. But yeah, right now I'm reading The Republic by Plato. So that's a really interesting read. Although that's a bit more like societal philosophy. It's they talk a lot about societies and um, how to structure society and um, yeah, sort of building that around human behavior and social dynamics um, and yeah, like the state versus the individual, and the ruling class versus different classes. So that's a bit more political, you know. Um, but yeah, Plato's interesting too. So I think I'm gonna end it there, boys. It's been a long stream. But the first move says you skipped one of my questions, Ian. I appreciate you answering all of them though. Oh, my bad, bro. Which one did I skip? Just drop it in again. I can answer it before I head off. Um, but yeah, other than that, I mean, I'm just gonna eat some food. Um, yeah, eat some food, make some noodles, and then yeah, just maybe do a bit of revision um, for this tech sales course. Okay, did you put it in the? You said you dropped it. What did you say? I'm just going through my chat. Just going through. Sorry. The first move. Did you say that you dropped it? So you're saying that it's not there anymore, or what are you saying? I'm not quite sure. Otherwise, yeah. I guess I'll just plug my coaching again. So as I said at the start of the stream, if oh, okay. Uh, well, I can't see any other question, my friend. Oh, I think it was the could you talk was it the could you talk about the type of photos to have and such too? I struggle with Instagram. Was it that one? That might have been the question that you wanted me to answer. I'm always like, what do I do when there's nothing being said in the stream? I feel like a silent stream just completely nukes the viewership. But hey, if you're getting value, then you'll stick around, I guess, eh? Ba-ba-ba-da, ba-ba-ba. But yeah, anyway, so I'll say this again. So, if you've found this live stream valuable, or my other live streams, or my content has resonated with you, then, I am in the UK and I'm available for coaching for the next few weeks. So I have a link in my description where you can just apply for a pretty simple application call where we can go through your current situation and yeah, get a better sense of where you're at in terms of your cold approach journey, whether you have done an approach or maybe you haven't started yet and you need that support and you feel like, you want to make a big change and transform your life like I transformed my life, then yeah, feel free to book a call. We can have that 30-minute, 45-minute discussion and then yeah, see if we're a good fit. Because yeah, I don't want to work with anybody, but if I think that I can be of value to you, be of service, then yeah, I'll be more than happy to spend time helping you transform your dating life because yeah, this is really important. My life has certainly transformed because of it. And I really want to help other guys get through this because yeah, with the way that the world is going with AI girlfriends and AI chatbots and OnlyFans and birth rate crises, it's like, we need to, I feel like there needs to be a counterculture movement, right, of guys who are helping guys get out of that pit, especially guys who have something to offer, right? Guys who, should be having good dating lives, guys who are dateable, guys who have done something with themselves, right? That was certainly somebody that I was, and I just had this one part of my life that wasn't um, aligned with all the other, let's say, achievements that I had. So yeah, if that's you, then feel free to book a call. It won't, no pressure on it. But yeah, otherwise, hope you boys found this valuable. And like I said, Instagram is an amplifier, not a generator. So there we go. Otherwise, have a good evening, yeah? Peace out, boys.